Hello everyone, welcome to the Sons of Antiquity podcast. I'm your host Dan, and I'm joined in the studio by my co-host Evan.
How's it going? Back in May of 2021, Dan and I had no idea what the podcast would really look like in a year's time. And come to think of it, we didn't know what the country would look like either. But we're happy to say we've survived long enough to see this show's first birthday, and America hasn't been invaded by the Visigoths yet. So we've actually got a lot to be thankful for.
To celebrate these accomplishments, we've decided to look back over the past year and talk about some of the most notable news stories and world events, maybe throw in a few hot takes while we're at it. We'll also critique the show itself and discuss our ups and downs, our joys and sorrows, if you will, and ask ourselves, what can we do better, and where do we go from here?
But before we get to all of that, we'd just like to start by saying thank you, a real heartfelt thank you, to everyone who has been listening and watching for the past year. It's a labor of love, and we hope you enjoy it as much as we do. The Facebook page has 100 followers, the YouTube page has 34 subs, and the BitChute channel has 55 subs. And none of that would have been possible without you. So thanks a million.
Really, thank you, thank you, thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause, please.
Let's start off by covering our picks for the most interesting news stories from the past year. And by last year, I mean since May 20th, 2021. In no particular order, here are the noteworthy stories we remembered and thought, why not talk about it?
So let's start off with the U.S.'s awful withdrawal from Afghanistan in August of 2021 and the recapture of the nation by the Taliban. The withdrawal was 11 years in the making, beginning with President Obama's announcement that a withdrawal would begin in 2011. But the timeline was pushed back year after year after year, and eventually it was handed off to President Trump. In 2017, Trump warned that, quote, hasty withdrawal would create a vacuum that terrorists would instantly fill. And although this led to a continuation of an already lengthy and expensive war, he was right. U.S. presence was scaled back further until Biden took over. And over the course of the first half of 2021, the Taliban ramped up activity while the U.S. made its intentions to leave very clear. By August, the evacuation was well underway. The Afghan military was basically destroyed. They collapsed under the weight of the Taliban advance. And the Taliban took over the country in about 2 weeks. And many Afghans were seen clinging to the sides of airplanes as they took off, evacuating the people. Here's a quote from Joe Biden following the withdrawal, and I actually agree with the sentiment here, believe it or not. Quote, 1 more year or 5 more years of U.S. military presence would not have made a difference if the Afghan military cannot or will not hold its own country. And an endless American presence in the middle of another country's civil conflict was not acceptable to me. End quote. I wish we'd had that attitude 20 years ago. It's a terrible, senseless end, befitting a terrible, senseless war. What say you, Evan?
The only people that felt vindicated by this withdrawal were the neoconservatives and the libertarians.
The libertarians have never wanted this, never really did. But how do the neocons come out looking good?
Well, they can easily say, you shouldn't have withdrawn.
Withdrawing
is what caused this debacle.
Of course.
And it's true because, to be fair, they could have done this a lot better.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, stranding a ton of Americans there and leaving all our weapons just to be taken over by the Taliban.
That was the worst part. We left millions of dollars worth of tech and equipment over there for no reason. We didn't have to. We could have brought all this stuff back well before we brought the personnel back.
It could have just prolonged the occupation by 6 months or something to get it all back.
Exactly.
It's not even the money factor. It's just that you're leaving all these weapons in the hands of our enemies.
Exactly.
So now the Taliban has high-tech missiles and a horde of other stuff.
Of course, yeah. They have Humvees, they have tanks, they have stashes of M4s. It's really just an awful... As I said, it's befitting that that's how it ended, because it was just such an awful decision from the very beginning to get involved in that region where you cannot just copy and paste democracy. You cannot remake a country in your image. And some would even argue that it may not have even all been about that. It was mostly just war profiteering and things like that, and kickbacks and to Boeing and
Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed Martin, exactly. Who knows really what was going on or how much money was made, but I do know one thing, that it didn't actually accomplish a single damn thing. It only cost billions and billions of dollars. Trillions of dollars, really, yeah. And thousands of lives for nothing, for all of it to go back to the way it was. We should have learned our lesson from the friggin' Russians. They couldn't do it, and they're tough as nails. Why did we think that we could do any better?
Well, I don't know if the Russians are tough as nails. They can't even take over a country run by Zelensky.
Oh, we'll get to that. Don't you worry.
Oh, I'm getting to it right now. Secondly, Russia invaded Ukraine. Might have heard of that. After months of threats, in February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, ostensibly to protect some of the Russian-majority eastern provinces which had declared independence from Ukraine and to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO. Obviously, it's still ongoing, and it has made us further question media narratives. Should we trust them this time? This one time, or are they right? Come on, guys. Some of the fringes of the right have defended Russia, and others have advocated for America to be neutral in the conflict. But almost everyone else has jumped on the Ukraine bandwagon. Is the war a noble struggle between David and Goliath, with the very ideas of freedom and democracy being threatened by a tyrannical communist? Or is the war an attempt to defend Eastern Europe from Western decadence and atheism? It's really up to you to decide.
No, I think I'll decide for you. I'll tell you what's really going on here. It's a bunch of globo-homo, money laundering, George Soros puppeteering.
Yikes.
Oh, I'm not finished. And who else knows what's going on? I mean, think about this. The Russian military, the entire Russian military spends about $60 billion a year. And we are just getting ready to send $40 billion. And if I'm not mistaken, it was basically with no strings attached or very little to no oversight. So where is that money going? What is it actually being used for? We're sending almost the budget of the entire Russian military to one conflict. Is that all going into Zelensky's pocket? Because with that amount of money, they could probably just take over Russia and flip the script. But that's not going to happen because this war's been dragging on. So what exactly is going on here? There is so much that the media is not telling us. There is so much that politicians don't want to talk about. And none of it really adds up. And there's been so much propaganda around it. They want you to believe that Ukraine is the innocent party here. Putin, or Putler, as some have called him, evil, bad, terrible. And I'm not saying he's not evil, bad, and terrible, but there's more going on here. It is not black and white. And if you think it is, then you need to re-examine the facts.
Now, let me ask you this. Have you heard a mainstream media source tell you Putin's reason for invading?
No.
See, you haven't even heard that. You don't even know his reason for doing it. I don't agree with his reason, to be fair, his reasons. But he did give reasons, and nobody who hasn't researched this knows it. They just said, oh, he invaded because he's evil.
Exactly. Now, I would say, okay, maybe I do know. The only thing that I could really come up with just off the top of my head right here is he just wants to reclaim those provinces that are more friendly to Russia. What reasons has he given?
It's NATO. Again, I don't agree with what he says, but he says basically, first, Ukraine isn't a real country, and it has always been a part of Russia, which is not true. Secondly, he said, back when NATO was formed, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it was supposed to not be in Eastern Europe whatsoever. That was the agreement, the word-of-mouth agreement. It's just going to be Western Europe and America. Yet, it has continued to encroach further east, to where now there are border countries like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. At least one of them is in NATO. And he'd always had the assurance that Ukraine wouldn't join. And then Ukraine said they wanted to join NATO. And NATO said, oh, yeah, sure. We'll start the process now. Yeah. So that was his reason, that he feels like the entire military might of the U.S. and Europe is meeting right on Russia's doorstep.
And that is what would basically be legal if that happened. If Ukraine joined NATO, we could legally have all of our stuff right there on the border, right there, ready to go against Russia. Now, what doesn't make sense to me is why he has done this when he knows that it's such political suicide. And really, it may even be truly like physical suicide to go up against all of NATO, knowing that they would rally behind the Ukrainians and put billions and billions of dollars towards this. They could basically just bankrupt Russia in a war of attrition if they really wanted to push it. So why did he think that this was the way to go?
I think he underestimated the resistance efforts and the willpower of Western Europe and the U.S. to actually do some real sanctions on him and his country. Because the war plans, Putin was ignorant. Let's be honest. He was completely ignorant about how good his military was. I think they were supposed to be done in a week or two to like take Kiev and take the government hostage and take the key harbors and the key cities in eastern and southern Ukraine. That was the plan. It was supposed to be like, come in, sweep them, done. And then we can work out something.
Yes, that would have been my plan if I had done it. You know, that sounds like a good plan. And he obviously went wrong somewhere. Where he went wrong is what I guess you're saying is, A, he didn't expect the resistance and he didn't expect as much support from NATO.
I don't agree with his invasion. I think it was stupid and not justified. I understand why he would be unhappy that NATO kept expanding, but to wage this war like he did, it's not like Crimea where he just took it and then nothing really happened to him. Because he didn't actually invade Ukraine when he took over Crimea. He just had them do an election and they voted to join Russia, and then they just basically seceded from Ukraine to join Russia.
I see. Yes.
It wasn't like sending people in to shoot them until they gave it.
He was more clever, about it. Yeah, I agree. That was a more effective strategy because it was less risk to him. This is such a huge risk in as far as manpower and money and just the optics of it. You just look like an ass. It just confuses me that he decided to make this decision. But what also confuses me is how people can rally around Zelensky, knowing that this dude was just a couple years ago wrapped up in one of the most scandalous events in American history, the Ukraine phone call with Orange Man himself. That was Zelensky. Nobody remembers that because their memory and their attention span is so short these days. But he was right in the middle of all of that, that was part of the reason behind one of Trump's impeachment trials because of his corruption. So how are you going to turn about 180 degrees saying, oh yeah, Trump bad because he's colluding with Ukraine, and then turn right around and elevate this guy, this Zelensky guy, to the status of like demigod?
And let me ask you, conservatives, would you support a politician who thinks abortion should not only be legal, but should be provided free of charge to anybody who asks for it at any stage in pregnancy? What about someone who thinks prostitution and a lot of drugs should be legal? Oh, you wouldn't vote for him? What would you support him and give him $40 billion and just go into all this propaganda about how great Ukraine is all of a sudden when no one cared about Ukraine before this? Nobody was supporting Ukraine before all this happened, and now it's like the best country in the world all of a sudden.
Because it's a cheap way to virtue signal. It's a cheap way to get acceptance.
I bet late 2021, if you polled Americans and gave them a map and said, put a dot where Ukraine is, maybe 20% would know where Ukraine was.
That is an extreme overestimate. You are being very, very gracious to
10 to
people.
20%.
I guarantee you that people don't even know where Ukraine is now any more than they did in 2021 before all this. People just put their flag out front. They don't actually know where the country is. They don't actually know the geopolitical situation or the history, and they don't really care to learn because it's all about just being part of the team. And my team is supporting Ukraine. So guess what? I'm going to support Ukraine. Do I really think deeply about it? No. Do I care that Zelensky's all pro-LGBT and trans and stuff and is part of the Jewish conspiracy? No. No one cares about that.
To summarize, I actually don't care anything about the war. I don't care who wins.
Yeah, me neither. Honestly, we should have just remained neutral from the beginning. It's their fight. Let them fight it out. And Ukraine, just in general, because it's a corrupt-ass country, should not have been part of NATO anyway. We should have at least extended that olive branch to Russia because there's nothing worse than a cornered enemy. And we cannot bring Russia absolutely all the way down to its knees where it has no other options. Because let's remember, guys, they're a nuclear power. I've said enough. Evan, you can have the last word on that.
Educate yourself before you take strong opinions on social media. At least look up the basic facts. That's all we ask. Thank you.
Now let's talk about something that everybody can hate on, regardless of your political affiliation, regardless of whether you're in Ukraine or Russia. We can all rally around how much NFTs suck. They came to prominence in 2021, but I'm glad to see these worthless wastes of time and energy completely collapsing and deflating. A picture of a monkey will never be a stable, low-risk investment. That you can be sure of. Guns, ammo, precious metals, and other tangible objects, on the other hand, are the only tried and true investments worth your time. Plus, in a grid-down scenario, or a Maz spaghetti hits the fan situation, you probably won't be able to trade your digital image for food or survival supplies. You'll just be put out of your misery by people like me.
Hand in hand with that, in May of 2022, cryptocurrencies lost a total of $600 billion in a week. This was a complete crash and proves to many critics like me that crypto is a fad with no real future. Sure, government fiat currencies are bad news, but at least invest in something real to try to beat inflation.
I couldn't agree more. And I had some crypto, and I was kind of into the crypto thing when it started popping off in late 2020, early 2021, I guess. And it was cool. It was fun for a little bit. And then I just decided to let it ride. And, I could have probably gotten out earlier, made some profits, but now everything's tanking. So I'm just going to let it ride again. There are a lot of people who got into the whole crypto game just like last time, just like in 2017, end of 2017. They had never lost money before. They had never seen the market go down. When things are bullish, is like, oh man, this is so great. This is the next big thing. And then they get so upset when everything turns bearish again. Well, guess what? You just haven't been around long enough. Once you go through a few of those cycles, you realize that it comes in waves. You just got to ride it out. Play it smart. And a lot of people, they just put all their eggs in one basket and they thought this thing was going to ride to the moon. And, the memes made them think that way. Maybe Elon Musk made them think that way. And he made a bunch of money, but you didn't. So take that as a learning experience, guys, that markets fluctuate and you just have to diversify.
Speaking of going to the moon, do you have another topic to show to us?
I do. What a great segue to the new privatized space race, you might call it. Jeff Bezos went to space in September of 2021. Now, I personally wish he had stayed there. But Blue Origin also has now officially entered the second space race, along with Virgin Galactic and SpaceX. That's Elon Musk, if you didn't know, which is an extremely impressive feat. Say what you will about these billionaires. I'm sure Evan will give his 2 cents here in a second. But this is a race that people said could not be done and would never be done. But I always hoped it could be real one day, and now it is. I have fond memories watching sci-fi movies as a kid and thinking that it had to happen. The power of spaceflight had to eventually trickle down from big agencies and governments into the hands of real people, which, these billionaires are real people. And pretty soon it will trickle down again to the moderately rich, and maybe eventually it will be a thing that every person with a little bit of money can do. Space tourism could be real within our lifetime and affordable within our lifetime. So space travel, colonization, I think it's got to start off small and be a little expensive and exclusive. But soon it will become easier and easier to do. And so far, I've been right in some of my predictions. It's a good feeling. So I'm on cloud 9 when it comes to that.
I think you should come back down to Earth.
Why do you say that, sir?
What's the point of going up into space and then coming back down?
Some people would say, what's the point of climbing that mountain? What's the point of going over the ocean? What's the point of doing this? Sometimes things are just big and tough and that you may not be able to see a end result now, but in the future, you'll realize, these were just the baby steps towards bigger and bigger projects, which we will need. Inevitably, we will need. There's nothing that's going to stop the population from growing on this planet. Okay, there's very few things that are going to stop that. And if the populations are going to stay at this level and we are going to maintain this level of wealth, we need a certain amount of energy. And that certain amount of energy is not necessarily available indefinitely on Earth. A lot of this is geared towards getting the means to create energy for the foreseeable future, mining on the moon to get materials we need for fission and fusion, which will power this planet possibly, for the next few centuries. And an insurance policy. If we can get to Mars, like Elon Musk is planning, and we can push through and really make a self-sustaining civilization there over the course of centuries, which is what it will take, then we can almost guarantee that the human race will never die out, which is awesome. Our descendants will thank us for all of our efforts. They'll say, wow, I'm so glad that they gave us 2 homes instead of just 1. So now if something bad happens on one, at least we got another one. Thanks, guys. Thanks for not putting your heads in the sand. I know it seems like it's crazy, just flying up in a spaceship, coming back down. I get it. But like, these are the little teeny tiny baby steps required to do something massive. And Elon Musk, an ambitious guy. It's a very far-fetched plan he's got, but he has impressed people this far, and he has had some successes so far. So I think that even if he can't do it, he will inspire others in the future who will. And I think we need that. We need this win. Humanity needs this win.
You can't run away from your problems or fly away from your problems.
Oh, humans have been doing it for millennia. Of course we can. That's what we're born to do, man.
I just have to say the Industrial Revolution was a mistake. Changed my mind. The fact we have to go to other planets in order to sustain our system is ridiculous. It shouldn't be that there's not enough on this earth to sustain us. And there are ways to keep the population down, by the way, that aren't genocide.
I'm not advocating for genocide.
I'm just saying, I know you're not, but there are ways to keep the population down that aren't immoral. I mean, most of them come from nature. For example, plagues, a bunch of other things that aren't fun to live through, but have kept happening throughout history to keep the population down. There are natural ways to keep it down. So I just fail to see how going to another planet will solve any problems, except if you think that the Earth is going to get hit by an asteroid and die.
Well, I mean, that is something that could happen. There's a lot of stuff out there. It's a shooting gallery out there, and we don't think of it. You know, we go about our daily lives and we don't see all this stuff flying around out there. There's a lot of stuff that could kill us. And, you know, the timescales are very large, but as far as science can understand, there's been about 5 or 6 mass extinction events on Earth in its history, in the history of life that we know of. So it's not crazy to think that it could happen again.
Yeah, we're causing another one.
By doing what?
By living our lives the way that we think we should live them.
You're right.
With our industrialization.
You're right. We're poisoning the water. We're making everything nasty. Potentially global warming. I'm not saying I buy into that, but maybe it is true. Yeah, no, I agree. But you cannot escape certain aspects of human nature. Let me run them down for you. 1, they don't think big picture. They think immediate, little, tiny picture. So even if you could convince them that there's a lot of stuff going on that's going to kill us, they're not going to listen. They're not going to change their ways. 2, you're never going to stop people from trying to advance and make money off of those advancements. So even if you think that, oh yeah, plagues and stuff like that, that's great, but people are always trying to make new medicines and things like that. You're never going to stop humans from trying to profit off of inventions that will save other humans. So you're always going to have an increasing population unless something absolutely freaking drastic happens. And if that happens, then we're absolutely donezo. So I think that all things being equal here, all humans basically just living their lives the same way they have for centuries, running away from their problems, ignoring the big picture, etc., doing things that in the long term maybe are harmful to them. We have to counteract that somehow. And the only way to do that is to go across the ocean to the New World. The ocean is space. The New World is Mars. Case closed.
Speaking of plagues, in September 2021, President Biden ordered that all employers with more than 100 workers must require all of their employees to get vaccinated or get tested weekly. This includes private sector employers, healthcare facilities which receive Medicare or Medicaid, and all who do business with the executive branch of the federal government. It affected 100 million Americans. Biden's reasoning was clear, quote, "We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us," end quote. With the unvaccinated causing, quote, "a lot of damage," unquote. Many corporations, including the one I used to work for, enthusiastically complied with the mandate and forced everyone to get vaccinated, with termination and religious exemptions being the only avenues of escape. Legal challenges began immediately, both due to the authority of the president and OSHA to mandate private sector affairs and to the constitutionality of forced vaccinations of adults. In January of 2022, the Supreme Court struck down the mandate, except for healthcare workers. However, the interim period forced a lot of people who didn't want to get vaccinated to get the jab. Now that Ukraine has been invaded, COVID has very politely decided to take a backseat until the midterm elections get close.
That was so polite of COVID. Yeah. Give COVID a round of applause, guys. Come on, man.
That's the one thing I love. That this is going to be sound very bad. But the good thing about Ukraine getting invaded is no one talks about COVID anymore.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of that shit.
Dude, I'm with you. Instead, now they're just talking about all the dead kids and women. But you know what? It's a small price to pay for no COVID coverage, am I right? No, I certainly wouldn't say that. As heartless and evil as I am, even I wouldn't say that. I just wish they would shut up about both of them. But anyway, since we're on the topic of COVID, let's talk about the total number of deaths, which just recently reached 1 million in May of 2022, and nobody called out Biden or demanded that he resign, even though Biden famously said that Trump's 200,000 deaths during his time in office was way too high for the president to remain in office. Whoopsie. And although many brain-dead NPCs want you to believe that Biden, not Trump, is responsible for the distribution of the coveted jab, Trump spent nearly all of 2020 trying to accelerate production and distribution of the Vacc. Not that that's a good thing, in my opinion. It's just an example of how people will ignore inconvenient truths to cheer for their side.
Yeah, it's very annoying. Nobody will blame who needs to be blamed and all that. But if you haven't noticed, prices are going up and inflation is making a roaring comeback. February 2021 to February 2022 saw an inflation rate of 7.9%. Meaning that $1 in 2021 is now worth less than 93 cents today. This is the highest inflation rate since 1982. 7.9% is only the average. For example, used cars went up 41.2%, gas 38%, beef 16.2%, and other examples. Wages are not keeping up, so the average person is poorer this year than last year.
Yeah, well, I certainly feel a little poorer. I know a lot of people, in my family and people I work with feel the same way. And, I haven't seen gas prices up in the $4 since the Bush years. And I wasn't even driving at that point. It was just I would ride along in the car with my mom or dad and just see the signs and think, wow, that's kind of higher than it was a few years ago and this and that. And I'd hoped that it would never get this high again, but I knew that eventually it would. Sure enough, here we are. And it's just a shame, for all the people who are living paycheck to paycheck and things like that, were already struggling before all this. It just must be a nightmare for them. So my heart goes out to any of you guys who are struggling out there. Keep your head up. It's going to be tough, but we are going to get through it. I know we will.
We're in this together.
Yes. Thank you, Evan. Thank you so much. That just made my day.
Thank you. Give us $20.
Now let's talk about our last little topic here before we get to our discussion of the show and the critique of the show itself. We'll talk about the social media shakeups. First, there was Elon Musk trying to buy Twitter, and then there was the release of the Facebook files at the end of 2021. So Elon Musk, he spent the first few months of 2022 quietly purchasing a greater and greater stake in Twitter, reaching 9.2% in April, and leading some to believe that he will take a seat on the company's board of directors. Surprisingly, Musk refused that offer, but a week later announced an offer to buy the company outright for $44 billion, hoping to reshape it into the free speech platform that he believed and still believes it should be. Negotiations are ongoing, and now Musk is pushing Twitter to prove its claim that only 5% or fewer accounts on the platform are bots, which is unlikely. It's probably way higher. And the reason he's trying to get them to prove that is because then it's worth less. If 50% of Twitter is bots, then you're basically, the advertisers who are paying to be on there are advertising to robots, which there's no point in, obviously. So he's trying to see, is this really even a valuable thing to buy? So that might be a deal breaker for him. I'm not holding my breath, but I am cheering for him because I want Twitter to be the free speech platform that it always should have been. And as for the Facebook files, these are a series of documents, leaks, interviews, testimonies, and investigations which have revealed what we all knew from the beginning. Facebook is biased. It puts profit before principles. It rarely does what Zuckerberg promises in public, and it preys on the youth and has exacerbated political strife and sensationalism in order to increase engagement on the platform. In other news, water is wet. But don't overlook this story, guys, just because it seems obvious. Go check out the reporting on it from Wall Street Journal, even WAPO, and 60 Minutes. They had an interview with the whistleblower Frances Haugen. It's kind of a black pill, I'll admit, but it will confirm what we already knew, that these tech companies are about as corrupt as they get.
Well, that seems like a good place to end that segment on the uplifting year of 2021 and early 2022.
You got that right.
Let's move on. Though the past year was full of failures and embarrassments, there was an obvious upside. The Sons of Antiquity was born and grew to what you know and love today. With that being said, let's proceed to the full-length episodes we were most proud of. For me, in no particular order, Anacyclosis, because it was our first, and frankly, it set an excellent precedent. Atheism, because it was our most big brain episode. It was just filled with good arguments and high-level conversation.
It was.
Latin Mass, because it gave me a chance to talk about Catholicism a lot. And Ship of Theseus, because it was a really deep discussion that I enjoyed.
Yes, and how old was our debate on Ship of Theseus? When did you tell me that? I remember you texting me about it. Have you ever heard of this? This was, like 4 or 5 years ago you sent me that?
I'd say 4 years ago.
Probably about 4. So yeah, we had been talking about that idea for a while. And so I was really glad when we got to do that episode, because it kind of brought it all full circle. For me, episodes that I was most proud of, the political spectrum, because that was a 2-parter, so it was pretty big. And we got to talk about something that we discuss all the time, which is, different parts of the spectrum and different groups. And many of those groups we have been loosely associated with or have identified with in the past. So that was cool. And atheism, of course, it was just such a big episode, so deep and rich. And yeah, I got to give it to Anacyclosis. I mean, it really set the stage for what the show would later become. So I think maybe one day in the future we'll do a revisit to that episode and maybe dive even deeper or cover something that we didn't quite mention in that. But that would be fun.
Not only will our episodes last throughout the ages, but many of them were simply a blast to prepare and record. We don't just cover serious nerdy stuff on Sons of Antiquity.
Oh, no.
No. Check out these episodes if you want to unwind.
Conspiracy theories. Who doesn't love a good conspiracy theory? And we talk about some really controversial ones in there. Some of them you couldn't even listen to on YouTube. So the BitChute and Google Podcasts, I think Apple Podcasts versions, they got the full script. They got everything in there, including the COVID conspiracies. So if you're interested in that, check that out. Some easy listening. And then beer and rap music were 2 episodes. Beer just dealt with, obviously, the history of beer and some of our own personal favorite beers and experiences homebrewing. And yeah, rap music was another good one, just about a more modern topic.
Sure, I would say Mob Mentality was also really entertaining.
Oh, it was fun, yeah. And that's one of the more popular ones, I think, on the audio platforms.
Fighting sports, of course. And, of course, beer. That was a fun time.
Who doesn't love a good brew, It's an American thing. So I think a lot of people would probably really enjoy that one specifically.
You should be glad that Dan is such a good editor, because there was plenty of released gas in that episode.
That is for sure. I can vouch for that. Yes. Burping nonstop. Just about after every segment, we just had to pause and let Evan belch it out. Now let's talk about some of the episodes that took the most work and research. While the podcast is mostly fun, sometimes it does feel more like drudgery. Here are the episodes that had us burning the 3 a.m. oil, not even the midnight oil, 3 a.m. oil.
Taxation. Sounds great. Doesn't work. It was a lot of work, but I'm a nerd about spreadsheets. So it was actually kind of fun.
Dude, spreadsheets are your thing, man. Oof. I wish you guys could see the spreadsheet we have for like planned episodes and all this stuff. I mean, it's like color coded. It's all organized. Evan keeps up with it really well, and it's just awesome. And so he was able to apply his skills on the taxation episode. He really did about 99%. I think I looked up one thing for that episode for him, and that was about it. But he just absolutely killed that. And that was back when we were on the weekly schedule too. That was impressive.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
And Last Stands, just because there was so much background I had to do. I had especially in mind the Syrian
Oh, the Syrian Civil War, yeah.
That was, I shouldn't have even included that one. It was annoying.
But I appreciated it, and I thought it was interesting, even though you kind of, I think you had expressed at the time that you were worried you like did a disservice to it because you had to summarize so much because it was so complicated that even though we had like a gigantic paragraph on it, it was just not even going to do it justice because there were so many different viewpoints on it and different sides to the story. But I think we did well on it. I was satisfied with it, very satisfied.
And political spectrum, just because there was a lot of information, a lot of ideologies, a lot of didn't try real communism. And finally, the Crusades, because it was a boring book I had to read, and it was just kind of a depressing topic.
Yeah, I agree. That one was pretty depressing. Some of the ones that I thought took the most work, atheism, again, huge episode. So we tried to dive into attempts to create an atheistic society. So we did a lot of kind of studying on Russia and the Soviet Union in general. And so that took a long time. Taxation, obviously, Evan just absolutely killed it. And with Epic Last Stands, I do remember, us dividing it up, saying, oh, which Last Stands do you want to cover? And, we kind of did our own thing and put it all together. So I definitely put in more work in the earlier shows before Hot Takes was its own thing. I spent a lot of time editing Hot Takes, and so Evan is definitely taking up the slack there, doing research. But I remember Last Stands was, that one in Political Spectrum, probably one of the last ones I really put in a huge amount of time researching, for better or for worse. You be the judge on whether or not the Hot Take show is worth having around. But I enjoy it, so.
The Hot Takes show evolved from being an unplanned segment at the end of full-length episodes to a planned, standalone video. Here are the hot takes we take the most pride in.
And I'll say real quick, only OGs will remember the original Hot Take sounder.
It's time for the Hot Takes.
And the original Hot Take segment. Only 90s kids will remember. So if you've been around for that long that you remember that the Hot Take segment was at the end, go ahead and smash that like button. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Or leave a comment. But as far as editing goes, are some of our most recent ones, I've really dived into DaVinci Resolve, which is a very powerful program for video editing. And I just have the free version. It's not even like all the features. So I'm able to do animations in there very easily, way easier than what I had going on before. So it's made the editing process a little smoother, and I'm able to make them look nicer, a little bit more professional, and just have more fun with it because I like doing little animated edits. So anti-grooming and journalists suck. Those are our most recent hot takes, especially the former because it had a really awesome natural flow. And I still have a soft spot for Twilight Zone, though. That was hot takes number 2. And it was so long. It was all black and white. And I think if I went back and watched it again, some of the animations in like the intro might have been a little bit amateurish, but still I think that it was a really fun episode to do, man. I had a blast making that one. And watching the Twilight Zone, that's always any excuse to go back and watch the Twilight Zone. I'm there. I'm down. Let's do it. What about you?
I think the big challenge with the Hot Takes show is trying to balance comedy with serious content.
Sure.
Because you don't want to make just absolute cancer content that'll get a laugh, like minute-long videos. You also just don't want to let me like complain for 10 minutes straight. So it's finding the balance,
Yeah, if you think Evan complains on the podcast or on the Hot Take show, just try making the show with him.
Yeah, he cuts out most of it.
But you're right. Yeah, it's a fine line, and sometimes we cross that line, and it's just too much of a meme. And then I think sometimes it is pretty serious. Like I think it's one of the last episodes. I felt like it could have been a solo episode with you. It could have just been that type of video, and maybe that will be coming in the future. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But what were some of your favorites there?
England is gay. Don't say gay. Career women and clickbait.
Yeah, clickbait was fun.
Now, through our year of production, there have been a number of surprises and disappointments. For starters, Buckbreak Mountain being such a success was shocking. At the time of recording, over 700 views on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, what more can you say on that one? And honestly, it was just a project I had been thinking about. I just slapped it together, and one day I was talking to Evan, and he was like, "Man, I don't think we'll be able to kind of make the schedule for next week. Let's have an off week." I said, "That's fine. I got a video I can just post." And he was like, "Oh, okay." And I bet you probably thought it was like a short, or just something else. Like you had no clue what I had this Frankenstein of a video I had put together. And yeah, I just posted it up. Didn't really think much of it. I thought, it'll just be a filler. It's the biggest one on YouTube. Like, what the heck, man? That just goes to show you just never know what's gonna strike it big. And like, I didn't think Loud Dem Rangs was gonna do really big, and I didn't think some of the other ones were gonna hit big numbers.
Yeah, these episodes we spend so much time and effort on get like 5 views on YouTube.
Yeah, and then other ones, that are like, oh, maybe this will be all right. Maybe people like this. Oh wow, it gets a bigger response. It's interesting. Being more popular on BitChute surprised Evan. Now, he hadn't even heard of the platform before I brought it up and said, hey, maybe we should be on this platform. I think you were thinking just strictly YouTube, right? Right at the very beginning. And over there, over 5,200 total views as of today, May 24th, 2022, and 55 subs. So doing better than the numbers on YouTube, which, as you mentioned earlier, it's a saturated market on YouTube. BitChute's a little bit more streamlined, not as many people on there, so more room for you to make noise.
Our most viewed full-length episode on YouTube is Anacyclosis. That's surprising because it's not our most fun episode, but it's set the stage. At the time of recording, it's over 200 views on YouTube. Very good. Oh, it leads me to think that there's some kind of algorithm nonsense going on, because when we first uploaded, a whole lot of people watched it.
Relatively speaking, a whole lot.
I think YouTube put our video up more often in more people's feeds on episode 1, and then after that it went down for a little bit before coming back up naturally.
Perhaps. Yeah, I really don't know, and even to this day, nobody really knows why certain videos blow up and others don't, and why get more popular.
It was our first video, and it got up to 50 pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. So that surprised me.
Yeah, if you were to chart like how quickly it got to 50 versus how quickly it's gotten to 200, it's definitely slowed down. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's kind of crazy. As I mentioned earlier, Law Dem Rangs, one of our hot takes, is the highest on YouTube. That's almost got 100 views. It's got 90, which, is modest, but relative to all the others, it's actually doing pretty good.
We have over 500 downloads on the audio-only platforms. Mm-hmm. That's not bad, but it could be a lot better.
Could be. According to the little tracker, I don't know how often you get on there, but it says we've got 10 followers now, not just 8. And we've got, it's right now it's almost 550. It's getting up there, who knows? And although it may be too early to really tell, there are some good indications that the highlight reel that we have just debuted is doing well on the audio-only platforms, because it's such a bite-sized little nugget of a video or of a clip. It's just some of the best sections from the main show that are put out there just as a little teaser, so people can go, oh, I don't want to necessarily watch this whole thing yet, but let me just try out this little bite-sized piece. Oh, I like this. Maybe I'll try listening to the full show. So I think it's gonna do well over time.
On the disappointment side, there are a lot of videos with less than a dozen views on YouTube. There were, at the time of recording, 10 full-length of videos and 6 hot takes that didn't even crack 12.
Yeah, it's rough, man. It's rough on YouTube, and you just got to keep on hacking away at it. It's one of those things you just never know how the algorithm's going to treat you, and maybe at the end of the day, you just got to read the book. She's just not that into you. Susan is just not that into us. We're going to change that. We're going to make her want us. We're going to make her a believer. And the number of views on all platforms and total subs. Let's talk about that. Take off our rose-colored glasses or anything and just try to be objective. Was it a success or a failure? We got 1,800 total views on YouTube, 5,200 on BitChute, 500 views on the audio platforms, totaling about 7,500 views. That's 34 subs on YouTube, 55 on BitChute. Some of those are probably the same people, but if you wanted to be generous and just add them together, that's just a little less than 100. So, after a year's worth of work, starting from scratch with nothing, with no advertising, what can be said about that? Oh, and let's not forget 100 followers on the Facebook page.
That's true, but you post memes on there.
That's true.
It's not posting our videos only.
It's not videos only, but it is our videos. And I have some ideas on how to improve that, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But success or failure?
Somewhere in between. I'm not so disappointed that I want to cry myself to sleep, but I'm also not elated by our success.
What would have elated you? Well, at this stage, what would elate you?
If we had like 200 subs on YouTube and like 10,000 views, I'd be elated.
Okay. So honestly, you're asking only for like...
I meant in the first year. I mean, next year, the goalpost will keep moving.
Oh, okay. Sure. Of course, because you want to keep growing. Sure. I think that's fair.
Okay. On top of extensive research, this is what we did to fully immerse ourselves in episode topics. We read 16 books, did a 24-hour fast, did a complicated spreadsheet on taxation, went to Latin Mass, had a fighting bout, drank alcohol while recording, consulted a philosopher in high school Bob, exposed ourselves to the demons in Marx's work, and mused on eternal truths. Also, inspired by the topics at hand, I now regularly make homemade wine, and I'm currently making my first batch of beer. But here's a surprise for you. We have recorded a time capsule episode which Dan plans to bury soon. That's right, folks.
We're going underground.
Tell us a little more about that, Dan.
Oh, I would be delighted to tell you about that. Well, right when Evan came over, we sat down and we laid it down on the track for about 30 minutes and just shot the bull and talked about some of the predictions that we had for the country and for our own personal futures, some hopes, some dreams. And we talked about some current events, things like that. It was a little bit of a time capsule in the sense that we preserved some of the current events that are going on right now and talked about them, and also made some predictions in the future that we can either point to and say, oh, hey, that came true. Wow, that was good on you. Or, haha, that was so stupid. Could they have possibly thought that? We tried to have a balanced discussion in that regard. So I'm thinking maybe in 5 to 10 years, I haven't really decided yet, we'll open it up. And if we're still doing this, which I really hope we are, and I hope it's a lot bigger and we can reach a bigger audience, we can play that for you. And that'll be a really cool moment, for us to be able to unearth this thing and share it with the world. Even though it's really not that exciting, but it would just be kind of funny, I think, to talk about all the ways our lives will inevitably change in that time. And the last thing I'll say is I encourage all of you out there to make a time capsule as well. It doesn't have to be something like that, a recording, although that would be awesome. It could just be some objects that are really important to you right now, or photographs and things, and you just put them in a tin can and you bury it, and then you just kind of forget about it for a little bit. It's a really cool exercise because it's low effort, but it can bring back so many great memories in the future. And think of it as a gift to yourself in the future. Think of it that way.
Also, feel free to tell us how you think the country will be in 5 to 10 years, or other things that you think will happen in the future. Please comment on the video and we'll engage with you in conversation.
Yes, of course. As many people have pointed out, YouTube is basically like a time capsule. You can go back and relive moments of your life and reread comments and things like that from long, long ago. So please do that. Now it's time for the obligatory takeaways. As Bon Scott of AC/DC once said, it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. And the same, I think, goes for the podcast game.
Starting a podcast is a humbling experience, but it has allowed us to sharpen the saw, to borrow a phrase often used in the venerable art of manliness.
We made some new memories, and we learned a ton of great stuff over the past year. Many things we probably never would have learned had it not been for this show, and we got to share them with you, and that was the cool part. And lastly, our lingering questions. Will the Boogaloo or a true energy crisis, or even World War III, break out before we can make it to our second birthday?
I don't think it will get that bad that quickly.
No? You don't think monkeypox is going to just overrun everything?
There's a certain very specific action you can avoid to not get monkeypox.
Yikes.
And for the majority of people, that is not an option on the table anyway. So
no, I had heard that you could get it from just hand contact, or contact with tables and stuff. You don't have to do any debauchery. But I digress. Who knows? I don't think it'll happen in a year, but maybe in a couple years, some serious stuff is going to go down.
Should we continue to do this podcast? Is it worth it?
Well, hell yeah, it's worth it. I think it is. Even if it doesn't grow at the speed that we want, and even if it doesn't make us any money or anything, to me, it has always been just a fun hobby. I've always thought of it that way from the very beginning. And yeah, it would be great to make it big and have a bunch of a cool audience members, a community. But at the end of the day, even if I'm just not even an internet micro celebrity, an internet nobody, I personally am cool with that because I just enjoy the process of putting stuff together. And maybe one day I will be bored, but right now I'm not.
I don't agree.
That's fine. That's why we are such a good team. Why don't you agree, sir?
Time is a very valuable thing. And if I'm not getting the bang for my buck from, at least having people subscribe or leave a like or a comment, then I just feel like, maybe there are better uses for my time, especially since I'm married and have 2 kids. It's possible that eventually this may not be worth my time. So if you want the show to keep going, I think it'd be good to show us some love.
Show us some love.
Get some of your friends and family to watch us if you think they'd like it and they could benefit from it. I think most people could benefit from it. As to whether they like it or not, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a different question altogether, I guess. But yeah, there's some interesting nuggets there that we have provided over this year. So yeah, spread the word if you could. Do us just a little teeny tiny favor. What are some changes that we could make to attract more listeners? Now, that is not only just a rhetorical question or a question aimed at you. Please, if you have suggestions, leave them in the comments. But just to Evan or to me, how could we change this to attract more listeners?
Audience, would you like us to cover more current event topics or more of the bigger topics? Because I personally think the latter. But if you think that you don't care about these eternal truths and you'd rather just hear about the latest drama, maybe that's something we have to consider.
You want ancient wisdom or like a modern scandal? Is that what you're going for?
Yeah, I just think there are so many outlets out there that just cover the day-to-day. Maybe a wire that comes out, every day. There are many platforms that cover daily news. I feel like our additional voices would not be of much value, especially considering all the great YouTube channels that cover it, and they're funny and they're insightful. I feel like we play a different role in the YouTube community than just reporting on what's happening that'll be ignored in a year. That's my opinion, but if you like those sensational episodes, let us know. And also if you like the shorter episodes, especially the ones that Dan makes, that are more funny, not serious, but like the 1 minute videos.
But don't necessarily have to be. That can also be a critique. I want to see 5 to 10 minute episodes, but I don't want too much comedy. I want a 5 to 10 on something that's important, but not super gigantic. Because obviously 5 to 10 minutes is not enough to cover a gigantic topic. But if you're efficient with it, it could be done. So let us know if you want that, because we can make it happen.
I think that's where the highlight reel comes in, because it is taking mostly serious content and just keep giving it to the audience in bite-sized pieces.
I agree.
So it is almost the best of both worlds, in that if you don't really want to spend an hour or 45 minutes to an hour on an episode, here's a good segment on university education.
Sure.
That might be something the audience wants, shorter but serious videos.
Yeah.
Not like your Jack Bauer one, but also not like our 2-hour atheism video.
Somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Let us know, guys. Really, let us know.
How have we gotten better since episode 1?
Ooh.
Have we?
Oh, that's existential. I think in some ways, no, we haven't gotten any better. But in many ways, we have. All right. And I mean that in like the best way possible. I think editing has gotten way better. I think our style has become a little bit more streamlined. Our intro is certainly better. Good night. That alone is just an improvement already. Because the more I think about it, the more I hate the original intro. But, a great artist is always his biggest critic. So, I was never going to be happy with it to begin with. But all kidding aside, I think we definitely have found our groove, found our niche. And I think we've done a real good job of picking episodes that we're both interested in, or at least moderately interested in, and ones that you don't always see on the interwebs. So I think we've improved in that way, like kind of refining how we decide on what episodes to do. What about you? What do you think?
I think we've gotten a lot better. I'd like to think that my style has gotten better too. I was more boring in the beginning, and now I'm only a little bit boring.
I think you've become more conscious of it, of that you don't like it, and you're working to fix it. And that's a huge part of the solution there. You just have to identify what you don't like and just work to fix it. So just being aware of it has helped you. What upcoming episodes are we most excited about?
There's one I'm excited about that I don't think Dan is, but
Oh,
it's my working title of it is Why Cars Ruined Everything.
I'm excited for it because I just want Evan to be on his soapbox and to be able to make fun of him for being on his soapbox. That's what I'm most excited about.
I'm excited to reveal some things to you. I think I'm not just going to get on an environmental soapbox. That will be a small part of it, but just all the bad things about cars that nobody thinks about.
I'm going to be taken to school in this episode. I know, and I haven't even looked at the notes or anything. And once we get to that stage, I'm sure there will be stuff I'll have to research and things. But generally, I'm in the dark about that episode. So I am very excited about what lies in store. It sounds like you got some surprises, and I'm glad you do.
What about you?
Oh, I am looking forward to doing what I think will be our first biography, like full biography episode. Because we have done biographies as part of like a review of author's work. That's generally what it was. But we've never just sat down and said, all right, let's tell you the story of this guy's life. And we're going to do that in the next 5 episodes.
We're not 100% decided on who that's going to be, but there are 2 major contenders. We'll see who wins out.
I'm hoping the more controversial one wins out, but we'll see.
I think we'll eventually cover both. Do we want to reveal who that is or leave it up?
Oh, we can't give it away. We have to tease it. They got to come back for it.
I think it's probably going to be our next full-length episode, so get ready. Finally, what are some of the most important pieces of ancient wisdom we learned from doing the show?
For me, it is that history repeats itself. That's a given. That's easy. That's low-hanging fruit, though. Something that has been reinforced in my mind, almost more than anything, has been Sun Tzu's rule that the worst tactic of all is to besiege walled cities. In every single instance, that is the worst possible plan. Take that as literal or metaphorical. That is the absolute last thing you want to do, is besiege a walled city.
That is awfully specific.
If you think of it in literal terms, it is awfully specific. But if you think of it figuratively, it can open up some doors for you. I'm just going to leave it at that.
I would say that I learned you better read. Reading is the single best thing you can do to better yourself in every way that's not physical. And if you don't read, then you're ignoring the opinions of men who have lived for thousands and thousands of years before you. You're only consulting the people you hear, the media, and your own brain, which is a very limited view. And I think it's very important to consult with ancient texts and relate to them. It's a nerdy conclusion, but you shouldn't ignore all those people. They may teach you something.
And they're still around for a reason. We still remember their names and know their stuff for a reason.
And that's why we're the sons of antiquity, in a way. We're not the sons of modernity. We're not sons of the modern world. We're around because of the ancient world. And not an ancient aliens kind of way, where it's just mystical old civilizations doing everything perfectly. But we can take what was known back then and remove all the flaws of it and take what we can, because I think we have missed a lot since then, since the Enlightenment, since the Renaissance, since the Protestant Revolution. We've missed a lot of antiquity, and I think we would do well for ourselves to remember it.
Bravo. That's a highlight reel right there. Bam! I love it, man.
Anything else?
That's it. I've said too much. You wrap it up.
That's all for today's show. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and leave your comments. Please let us know what you think and how we can improve. If you're not a schizo, we are very likely to reply to your comments. Join us again next time for even more ancient wisdom.